So brand architecture in the context of category. So of course we all understand the basics. The category makes the brand, not the other way around. It's a very hard thing for people to wrap their brains around. Um, but it's simple. People have to know what it is before they care who makes it, right? So if I say to you, hey, I'd like to take you out to one of my favorite restaurants in Santa Cruz, and it's called Home. What might you ask?
What's
What kind
home?
of food is it, right?
Mm.
So what you're asking there is category. And you'll notice small entrepreneurs learn this intuitively or they don't eat. Harvard MBAs have a very hard time learning it, which is always interesting. Here's a simple example. Just start noticing signs around your neighborhood, signs on trucks, signs on buildings, billboards, etc. And what you'll see is, so for example, a neighborhood plumber, what you'll see is a big sign on the side of their truck that says plumber, and then Katrina Kirsch underneath that. Because you have to think plumbers are important, cool. You have to be considering a plumber before you care about who the plumber is. The second piece is the category makes not just the brand, but the demand, because categories are about customers, their problems, their opportunities, their needs, their wants, their desires. Brands are about us. And so there's a big aha here that goes like this: market your brand, and I think you want my money. Market my problem, and I think you want to help me. And that's the mindset that category designers come to or come from with everything, particularly with branding. So maybe let's get into a couple of fun examples. So in B2C, you can typically be super tight and super clean on this stuff. And the brand and the category POV, remember the category POV is representative of framing, naming, and claiming the problem. Because she who owns the problem becomes the solution. She who owns the problem becomes the solution. Okay, so there's a small chain of restaurant bars on the East Coast of the US, and they're founded by a group of dudes. Anyway, a bunch of dudes sitting around drinking beer, loved old school video games, Pac-Man and shit like that, liked to eat burgers and pizza. And then they had this aha, like all entrepreneurs. How come there's no bar? I think I'm almost positive they started in New York, in one of the boroughs. How come there's no neighborhood bar around here that plays old school rock music like Rush and Van Halen and shit, and Miss Pac-Man and all the fun games, and serves decent pizza and beer and the like? In other words, we want a bar in our neighborhood that's kind of like our living room. So that's what they do. And as you know, restaurants and bars have amongst the highest failure rates of all new businesses. Tough to make it work. These dudes did something different, though. They were intuitive category designers. See, for small entrepreneurs to survive, they either figure this out or they go bankrupt. So here's the category name. They called it an arcade bar, because that's what it has in it. Old school arcade games, plus the beer, plus the Rush, plus the pizza and burgers. Arcade bar is the category name. You ready for the brand? Barcade. Okay, that's what we call symmetry. That's what we call tight. Arcade bar, barcade. Barcade, the first arcade bar. Oof. It's hard to figure out. It's hard not to remember what they are, because the name of the place is Barcade. And so what they did was they went all in on one major differentiator, the arcade piece. They didn't try to say it was, oh, it's a arcade bar with old school rock and pizza and beer. No. They just got real clear. They knew the arcade piece would spark interest and intrigue. And so if you go to Barcade's website right now, what you'll see is Barcade. I believe it says the original arcade bar. Let's just make sure that's what it says.
It does. I just Googled it.
Okay, they didn't change it in the last 2 days. Yeah. Home of the original arcade bar. There it is. And, oh, this is important. on their website, it says Barcade is the originator of the arcade bar concept and the largest operator of arcade bars in the United States. When you do category design, you get to declare you're number one in the category you created. There's a million bars with arcade games in them in the United States. God knows how many there are. But there's only one that is frame claimed and named it. And now they can say they're the original, very important in category design. Original and first are very powerful words. They're trigger words in people's mind. Levi Strauss calls himself the original. Coke for years called themselves the real thing. This is very powerful. People want to be associated with the person and or outfit that is the instigator, that is what Barcade Bar calls the originator, aka category designer of the arcade bar. And they don't say category, they call it concept, but it's exactly the same thing. And so in this example, to put a fine sort of point on it, the category POV, and the brand name, the look of the whole thing, each is a multiplier on the other. And at most companies, they're completely divorced. Arcade bar, the original Barcade, the original arcade bar. Pure category design and marketing genius put together. Okay, so let's talk about Qualtrics. They did a gorgeous job of category design, and I happen to be very personal, close friends with the category designers that helped them. So the backdrop of this one's an important thing to understand. So Qualtrics was caught in a epic category battle for who's going to be the winner in the space. And based on our primary category science research, what we've discovered is that startups, particularly tech startups, they enter a phase of about a 36-month epic category battle. So when a new category emerges, imagine a bell curve, right? It starts to emerge on the bottom part of the bell curve, and demand starts to increase. And there's one company or two or three innovators, pioneers, movement makers, category designers, evangelizing a new problem and therefore a new solution. And it starts attracting customers, and it starts attracting venture capitalists, and it starts attracting people who want to come work in this new category or want to come work for this company pioneering this new category. And it builds and builds. And as it builds up the curve, if you will, more and more competitors, more and more investment comes in. And there comes this place where you just know the momentum, that is to say, the increasing demand in the category is attracting all of these folks, and there's now an epic battle. And that epic battle tends to be around 18 to 36 months, tend to be quicker in B2C and a little bit longer in B2C and B2B. Okay, so Qualtrics, when they did their new category design around a new category they called experience management, and we'll get to that in a second, they were in that battle. And there was 3 or 4 companies. There was a company called Medallia. There was a company called SurveyMonkey, and they were all in the survey space. Well, here's the aha in the enterprise market. There is no such thing as a legendary enterprise technology company that is not relevant in the corner office. So you will not be a successful enterprise tech company unless you matter to people whose title begins with C. The challenge in the space, when it was called the survey space, was nobody in the C-suite gave a shit at all. I don't care what you used for surveys. Just give me the results. Who gives a shit? I don't care how you make the pizza. Just make me a great pizza. And so what that meant for all the companies in the category, Qualtrics included, was they were stuck in what you might call dealing with Fred, Wilma, Betty, and Barney in the basement. And so it became clear that the first company that could break out and become relevant, important, and solve a strategic problem for C-level executives was going to be the one that win the space. Now, here's where branding and category design really come together. Of the 3 companies I mentioned, as soon as the category battle reached this place, one of them was out just because of their name, SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey is a great name when you're selling a quick buy. Somebody can buy it off your website, and you're selling to Fred, Wilma, Betty, Barney in the basement. SurveyMonkey doesn't sound like a company that a CMO is going to spend $1 million with or $10 million with. So their brand doomed them to lose the epic category battle. They could have done almost anything, and maybe they could have made it work. Maybe anything's possible. freakish things happen. However, the name was a massive albatross. They're out. So then it comes down to Qualtrics and Medallia. Oh, Qualtrics is a made up word, and it sort of speaks to quality and analytics. And most people don't think when they hear a word. That's why in category design, we tell people to stop. Think about thinking is the most important kind of thinking, and listen to the words. Qualtrics, mix of quality and analytics. Medallia, some kind of a morph on metal. Maybe like an Olympic medal. I don't know. I met the Medallia founders. They never explained it to me. Who cares? So one name's more powerful than the other. Medallia, okay. Qualtrics, great, because you don't have to be a rocket surgeon to know quality, analytics, matrix, metrics, etc. Okay, so that's where they start, and they're all in the survey space. Qualtrics comes out with a radically different, exponentially expanded point of view, way beyond surveys. They almost make the word survey illegal in their company, almost. And they say, okay, and in order to get to this category design, they had to do some serious thinking about thinking. And this requires zooming all the way back out and saying, what problem do we really solve? And asking that question 5 to 7 times, and then asking it again, and then asking ourselves, how do we language that problem? How do we speak about this in a way that's hugely strategic, that frames claims and names a problem that people in the C-suite are going to identify with and want to solve? So they're thinking about this. They get obsessed with the problem all over again. And at this point, the company is very mature, started by a father and 2 sons. One of the sons is a CEO. They're growing like crazy, but it's a knife fight. And they need radical differentiation if they're ever going to go public and if they're ultimately going to win the category battles. One company has to break out, and it's typically the company that stops saying what everybody else says and has the courage to be different and set a new agenda in the space. That's what category design is. Category design is setting the agenda, is defining what the problem is, and therefore what the solution and the specs of the solution should be and how it should look, and what kind of return on investment people can expect from solving this big, hairy, nasty strategic problem. So here's what they do. They have this aha by obsessing on the problem. They say, well, nobody gives a shit about surveys. Nobody really even gives a shit about survey results. What do they care about? They care about delivering for their constituents. Am I producing what customers want? Am I producing what employees want? Am I producing what partners want? And by producing, they think about, well, what is it we produce? Well, we produce a capability for companies to measure the experience that others are having with the company. And so, ta-da, we're not surveys, we're experience management. And we help you manage your customer experience and your employee experience and your channel experience. And they say the reason surveys are important is because it is a deep way to understand what's going on with those experiences across all of the critical domains for the enterprise. And they say the companies with the greatest experience win. And today they've evolved that, of course, to include AI. What happens when you have AI sitting on top of the world's largest experience AI database? Well, a lot of legendary things can happen. And so when Qualtrics does that, they set up the worst possible choice for Medallia and for SurveyMonkey. Because now customers respond positively. Qualtrics starts moving ahead faster. Qualtrics starts taking down the bigger deals because they're positioning themselves from a product perspective as an experience management platform that has all of these capabilities and components to it that are way more than just surveys. And when people buy into, oh yeah, it's not about surveys, it is about experience management. In category design, we call that a from to, a Frodo. So they go from surveys to experience management, and then they want to be able to design and measure and manage those experiences to know, are we meeting the expectations of our constituents. So they do that. Qualtrics starts to pull ahead. SurveyMonkey and Medallia have one of two choices. They can either A, stay in their niche, but if they do, they're going to have to continuously argue the value of the sliver of what they do and not be able to compete at the platform level. Well, that's what SurveyMonkey did. And they're still around, but they're largely irrelevant. They're a low-end solution, which is fine. And maybe they'll thrive down there, but they lost the war again, the category battle against Qualtrics, and maybe they can live at the low end of the market. We'll see over time, but they're out as it relates to the high end of the B2B enterprise space in this entire category, which is now called XM. What does Medallia do? Medallia decides to compete. They rip off Qualtrics. If you go to their website, it says they're the experience management company. And when they do this, they Venmo their marketing and operating budget to Qualtrics, because Medallia spent several years and still is telling the whole world we're better than Qualtrics. We do the same thing as Qualtrics. The reference point is Qualtrics, because Qualtrics category designed the market. And Medallia is a public company. It's done okay, but it won the booby prize, because Qualtrics has gone on to become the category king and have a multi-billion-dollar value and win. And as long as the world believes the problem is experience management, how do we deliver legendary experiences? They'll continue to win. And Medallia will be in a horrible second place, an irrelevant company that will ultimately, if history is any guide, its market cap will continue to sliver and shiver and flither and bither and dwither. And one day they'll get purchased by an LBO firm. That LBO firm will fire everybody and suck as much maintenance out of the company as possible and spin it out to Broadcom or some other company that collects dead software and sucks maintenance. That's Medallia's fate. And the shame is, I know the Medallia founders as I know the Qualtrics founders. They're nice people. I told them this. I told them this was going to happen. We actually met with them before we met with Qualtrics. They didn't get category design. A few years later, they reached out, Qualtrics reached out to play bigger, and the rest is history. And so on the B2B space, just like in the B2C space, there are massive stakes here because we live in a world where one company wins it all. Our primary data science proves it. 76% of the total value created goes to one company. And so what we want to do when we want to fuse our brand and our category design together, the purpose of the brand is to evangelize the problem. And when the company name or brand name, in this case, Qualtrics, does it directly speak to experience management? Maybe not, certainly not in the way Barcade and Arcade Bar come together. However, quality, metrics, they fit together. Analytics, they kind of fit together. It's not a bad name. It's a good name. And it's a name that sounds like would be the name for a large, successful enterprise software company. And then they put experience management, which requires quality analytics together, a radical point of view. You need to deliver legendary experiences or you're not going to be in business. And we're the only platform for that. And that's how you design and dominate a market category and leave your competitors wondering what the fuck just happened. But what I know is Medallia thought about category design. They didn't get it. Fucking Qualtrics did. And their ticker symbol as a public company is XM. That's how committed they are. Just like Mark Benioff's ticker symbol at Salesforce is CRM. That's called being all in on the category. And they did it. And the Medallia founders, they had the chance. They were further ahead. They thought this was marketing mumbo jumbo.
I want to dive a little bit deeper to get into one of the questions that the strategy therapy student had. And obviously with Qualtrics, you can say experience management is the solution to a problem across all industries, right? You could argue that almost every business would need experience management in a way. The student is saying she's kind of struggling because she has three different targets in the same industry with three slightly different goals. It almost sounds like she's trying to come up with three different POVs. Do I come up with three different problems?
So this is always a red herring and people get caught in it. And if you have three quote unquote solutions to three slightly different problems with three slightly different audiences, unless you're telling me you sell fishing line over here and AI software over here and you're a donut shop over here, okay? But if the three things are remotely connected for any fuck reason, let me tell you a story about that breakthrough. And it produced one of the greatest category queen businesses of all time that has had a more than 30-year zillion-dollar run. It's one of the most successful products in the history of the fucking world. Here's how the story goes. And I know this story because the storyteller, the guy who did it, told me the story. His name is Mike Maples Sr. And Mike Maples Sr. was the first real business executive hired by Bill Gates at Microsoft. And well, Mike, I don't know what his exact title was. I think he was the president of the company, but it might be off. Anyway, he was the senior business executive running go-to-market operations and product management. I don't know if he ever ran engineering or not. Anyway, he ran a massive part of Microsoft, and he was responsible for many things. And this might be, it certainly is one of the greatest, and it might be the greatest. So back in the day, there were multiple application categories in an emerging new category called personal computers. And Microsoft was the category king of the personal computer operating system. It did a deal with IBM when the IBM PC first came out, so that Microsoft DOS, disk operating system, was the platform that all of the software on the IBM PC got built on top of. It was a huge category queen move. So they win that battle. And it was a very fierce battle. They win it. But now they want to continue to expand into applications. So they're sort of moving up the value stack from the operating system up to applications. Okay. Well, at the time, Microsoft was nowhere in PC applications. The main PC applications were separate categories designed and dominated by separate companies. Word processing, designed and dominated by a company actually in Utah called WordPerfect. Huge software company at the time. Designed and dominated by a company called Lotus. They actually did an acquisition, but that's a whole other story. They bought this product called 123. It's a spreadsheet. They turned it into Lotus 123. And you could make a compelling case that Lotus 123 was the superpower, quote unquote, I'm not going to say the word, legendary app, let me call it that made the PC, because you could do a level of personal data crunching on a spreadsheet with a PC that was heretofore not possible in any way like it. So in a very real way, the spreadsheet made the PC. Okay, so that's Lotus. Then the next category was a database category. And that company was Ashton Tate, and the product was called DBase. And then for presentation software, there was another company called Harvard something. Harvard Publishing, I think, maybe, whatever. The product was called Harvard Graphics. So you had four categories, separate markets, four category dominating companies. And over time, if you were a medium to high PC user, the likelihood was you were going to have 2 to 4 of those products on your PC. And they were all, I don't know, roughly $1,000 at the time. So we're talking about, late 80s, early 90s timeframe, right? All right. So Microsoft launches competitive products in each of those categories. And true to category king economics, nothing happens. They may pick off a little bit of market share here and there, but the reality is they can't unseat WordPerfect. They can't unseat 123, etc. So then one day, Mike Maples Sr. is in Australia. Those Aussies are so clever. And he's meeting with their head of Australia. And he's going through some numbers and doing some planning and looking at some stuff. And it turns out there's been a really big uptick in their sales of their applications that stands out. Now, this is important. In category design, we teach category science. And category science says Look for the weird. Look for the outlier. Most people, when they do data analytics, they create a bell curve of the data. They cut off either ends. They say that those are the outliers. That doesn't matter. And we're going to look at what's going on in the middle. And there's a lot of value there. However, when you look to the far edge, particularly with where are sales higher than normal in an abnormal way? So Mike starts asking the head of Australia, what's going on here? How come you're selling so much more of our applications than anywhere else in the world? And he says, well, it's really simple, Mike. We put them together in a bundle deal and we discounted them and we sold them together through our dealer channel. And people got excited. And then Mike Maples had an idea. And he said, what if these aren't 4 separate product categories? What if they're one? And then Microsoft zoomed out. You see, each one of these product categories solved a slightly different problem. Spreadsheets are not the same thing as a word processor now, are they? But when you zoom out and you say, well, what's the meta problem here? What is the larger context, the larger frame? How do we frame, name, and claim a bigger problem that sits on top of, and if you will, unifies the problems, aka use cases of these different apps? And then they had another aha, which is, what do people really want? They want to increase their productivity. At the time, word processing software, just like AI is today taking some jobs, word processing software destroyed the old category, which was a thing called, you ready? The secretary pool. Google it, click on images, and what you'll see is black and white pictures of mostly women sitting in these huge rooms. They look almost like mini factories, banging away on typewriters, because that's how you did word processing back then. You gave them to you gave a bunch of notes to a secretary, and it went to the secretary pool, and they banged it out for you. And then you had one copy of it. Okay, that went away with WordPerfect, because now we could be more productive. We could just type it up ourselves. Okay, so they had this insight. It's about productivity. And then they said one of the most powerful things you can say. And let me zoom out for a quick sec. In category design, we always remember today's solutions are tomorrow's problems. Today's new solutions are tomorrow's even newer problems. So they said everybody's trying to have a productivity gain, whether it's with spreadsheets or word processors or databases, presentation software. That's what they ultimately want. But guess what? Each one of these problems is being solved in a different way with different applications from different companies. Their user interfaces, which is what we called them at the time. Today we call them UXs, of course, user experiences. No small thanks to Qualtrics, but and so the aha they had here from a product vision perspective, category vision was, what if we could bring it all together for people? And they had one suite to do it all. And then from a product perspective, they said, well, couldn't we produce a breakthrough in productivity if 2 things were true? One, the UXs were the same across all 4 or 5 product areas, categories. And 2, and this part was revolutionary at the time, they could share data. So that you could be in a Word document, update a spreadsheet that had been embedded in that Word document, and it would update the spreadsheet, or vice versa. Or you could be using that spreadsheet in all the applications. And you update it in the spreadsheet, and it gets updated in the PowerPoint, and it gets updated in the database, and it gets. This was a giant, awesome, legendary idea. Remember what time we're talking about, right? So what do? They reimagine the problem around how do we make office workers, knowledge workers radically more productive, particularly those that use one or more of these things. And the solution to that was you only have to learn one interface. And we introduced this technology called dynamic data exchange, DD. And it means that you can change the data once and it flows through the thing. And so they go and evangelize this different, and they declare it's a new category of, and they call it an office productivity suite. And then from a branding point of view, this is where the brand and the category come together. Of course, they call it Microsoft Office. And it becomes one of the 3 greatest offerings in the history of Microsoft. And to this day, they still have the dominant market share. And that was because Mike Maple Sr. was listening, went looking for the weird category science, discovered the anomaly, thought deeply about it, and came up with a product, brand, and category strategy. Beautiful branding, Microsoft Office, Office productivity. They lowered the price. So buying Office from them was cheaper than buying the 5 apps from the other evil competitors. So they had a different value proposition, and bam. And of course, the rest is history. And it's been a 30-year, multi-billion-dollar, every year, dominant category queen position. And their number one competitor, Google, is free. And it's a materially better product. We use Google at Category Pirates to write all our shit, to work on all our shit. As a matter of fact, now, and I used Microsoft Word and Microsoft Office for fucking 25 fucking years. I don't even know how to use it anymore. If somebody sends me a Word document, I don't know what the fuck to do with it, because the only environment I know how to write in and collaborate in is Google now. In spite of all of that, Microsoft still is the dominant player. And until Google or somebody else reframes the problem, they will be.